The movie begins with Ellen Hutter, a young girl in the 80s. She summoned and made a pact with Nosferatu, an evil force that's far beyond her control. After the pact, the demon vampire had sex with her, after which he choked her by the throat, thereby possessing her imminently. Not long after, she woke up and got to discover that it was just a dream. Her husband, Thomas, inquired what the problem was, because he noticed she woke up from a tedious nightmare. Thereafter, he hugged her passionately, convincing her that there's nothing to be scared of. Instantaneously, he figured he has run out of time, so he kissed her goodbye and headed out for work. After he left, Ellen reminisced on the nightmare she just had. It was 1838 in Alamein. Thomas hastily scurried to meet with Knock Mapler. As he got into the building, he first apologized to her Knock for coming in late. Knock admonished his apology, after which he congratulated him for being newly wedded. Moving on, Knock proceeded straight up to discuss business. According to him, he wants Thomas to strike an eccentric deal with an old count, who wishes to acquire a home here in Wisborg. Hoping to achieve financial security, Thomas accepts the deal from Knock, to sell Skolsgrunward, a rickety stately home in Wisborg, to the reclusive and eccentric Count Orlok. Thomas headed home almost immediately to break the news of his journey to his wife, convincing her Harding generously agreed to keep him till his return. On hearing this, she told him he mustn't leave, confessing that before her wedding she dreamt she married Death himself, with only carcasses in attendance, and to top it all off, she enjoyed the whole process, which was somewhat terrifying. Thomas convinced her he needs to go, because it's his only chance to attain promotion in his office, and make a lot of money as promised in the process. The next day, Thomas took his wife to the home of his wealthy friend, where she'll be staying, by the name of Friedrich Harding. Before he left, he reassured her that her nightmare was only a dream, so she has nothing to be afraid of, after which they made love to each other. The nightmares didn't stop as he said, rather the Nosferatu consolidated the pact Ellen made with him. Before Thomas left for his journey, she gave him her necklace, but unbeknownst to him, she cut her hair and placed in there the night before, fulfilling one of the Nosferatu occult necessity. Thomas eventually departed for Orlok's castle in Transylvania, Carpathian Mountains, leaving her in the care of a wealthy friend, Friedrich Harding, and his wife Anna. Not long after, he arrived at Transylvania, and the inhabitants there welcomed him with open arms. He was beguiled on how cheerful they were, but all of a sudden, they started laughing maniacally at him in a strange way. On spur of moment, the chief came outside, shunning the locals for their irritable behavior. He was being jeered at for his association with Count Orlok, but he was eventually able to bribe the chief, and pleaded he just spends one night with them. During his stay, an old lady gave him a cross, insisting he'll need it soon enough. That night, he witnesses them impaling what they claim is a vampire's corpse with an iron stake. He woke up the next morning, still terrified from the events that happened last night, but he waved it off and continued his journey to the castle. In the process of his journey, he saw a mysterious carriage on the way, but he courageously boarded it, and it rode him to the count's mansion, with menacing wolves running behind it. Arriving at the castle the next evening, Thomas is received by the horrendous and impatient Orlok, who dines with him and insists on finalizing the purchase of Schloss Grunwald with immediate effect. As they were dining, Thomas inquired on the information he received from the pleasantries, but Orlok dismisses it to be a superstition. Thomas wasn't convinced, but he waved it off and started munching his meal, but then he mistakenly cut his thumb with a bread knife. Orlok started mesmerizing on his injury, and on spur of moment, he feasted on Thomas, revealing himself to be a vampire. Ellen, on the other hand, tried her best to convince Anna there is impending danger on the way, but she felt Ellen was all in her head. The next night, Orlok had him sign a mysterious document written in an occult script. Not long after, he takes Thomas' locket and retrieved Ellen's hair imbued there. Orlok afterwards opened his chest of gold coins, then he paid Thomas his commission as promised, after which, Thomas eventually signed the document. After signing the occult script, Thomas requested to depart as he has concluded his part of the deal, but Orlok told him going home now is a black hole, insisting he has to stay behind whether he likes it or not. Instantaneously, Thomas woke up from a nightmare, and he saw the vampire marks on his chest. Knowing he has been fed on, he became ultimately terrified, and sought for urgent ways to leave the castle, but all the doors leading outside were locked tightly. As he was searching, he found a dark, bizarre bunker, so he treaded carefully downstairs. Thomas found Orlok sleeping in his coffin, so he attempted to kill him with a mallet, but Orlok counterattacked his move instantaneously. After Thomas ran away in fright, Orlok recited an incantation on Ellen's hair he retrieved earlier, and as this was happening, Ellen succumbed from the other realm. Suddenly, Thomas was compelled by Orlok to open the door he locked. Thomas was simpering powerlessly in fright, as he couldn't move a muscle due to the fact that he was compelled. Then on spur of moment, Orlok feasted on him mercilessly. Orlok afterwards had an appalling sex with him, while also continuing the feast. Back in Wisborg, Ellen suffered from a mysterious ailment, so Friedrich called onto his doctor, Wilhelm Sievers, to check and diagnose her condition. Ellen was moaning as though she was making love, so Wilhelm had to place her on anesthesia. Immediately he did, Thomas woke up almost immediately, and as he tried running away he fell into an unknown river. Ellen kept on experiencing series of bout and seizures, which Wilhelm Sievers, her doctor, struggles to treat. Ellen's condition kept on getting worse, and she didn't seem to be getting better anytime soon, and Wilhelm revealed to Friedrich that the devil is coming. A nun was picking up woods in the forest, but then she stumbled upon Thomas, laying almost dead, so she rescued him and took him inside the church. Dr. Wilhelm suggested Ellen's issue is out of his control, so he advised she be transferred to his mentor, Albin Elberhard von Franz, for further treatment. According to Wilhelm, Albin is a brilliant scientist ostracized in Switzerland for his occultist beliefs. Meanwhile, the nuns on the other hand said prayers for Thomas, and he was eventually relieved of the spirit he was plagued with. Instantaneously they urged him to stay and recover, but he refused, insisting he needs to rush back to Wisborg to protect Ellen. Elsewhere, Orlok journeyed to Wisborg on sea, with a crate of grave dirt and plague-infested rats, killing the ship's crew along the way. Wilhelm, accompanied by Friedrich, eventually arrived at Professor Albin's abode. He initially told them to go away, but Sievers forced his way inside. When Albin saw it was Sievers, he welcomed him to his home with open hands, after which he inquired to what he owes this visit. It was then Wilhelm consulted him on Ellen's issue, which was seemingly going out of hand. Weighing all the information he was given, Albin deduced Ellen is under the spell of the Nosferatu, a demonic plague-bearing vampire. Albin proceeded to treat her so she could get herself in the meantime, but in the process she became utterly possessed and Orlok professed himself through her, after which she lost control and started screaming for help. Albin told Friedrich that Ellen is cursed by a demon, but Wilhelm felt she was just being delusional. Friedrich remained skeptical, believing her symptoms stem from anxiety over Thomas's absence. Albin ignores his optimism, telling them he needs to study more on this demon, and before he left he told Anna to keep a close eye on Ellen, and call him if she starts acting up. Meanwhile, Nock is institutionalized after a gleeful rampage, and both he and Ellen prophesied Orlok's impending arrival. Not long after her prophecy, Thomas returned to Wisborg, but after he spoke with Ellen he passed out almost immediately. As this was happening, some guards called Friedrich from his house to bring an issue to his notice. They showed him Orlok's ship that was wrecked on shore, and his arrival brought plague to Wisborg. Orlok imminently arrived at his home, and it was then he met with his faithful worshipper, Nock. Nock submitted himself to the will of his master. Orlok swore that the land shall dread in despair of his coming, and not long after, his plague-infested rats stormed the town of Wisborg and a pandemic erupted. Ellen sat beside Thomas as he was very ill, and when Anna walked in she apologized for all the inconveniences she bestowed on her family. Wilhelm and Albin jointly examined a carcass they retrieved from Orlok's wrecked ship, and it was then they ascertained the rats were also demonic, so Albin requested to meet with Nock immediately. On hearing this, Sievers' subordinate unearthed he has already escaped, so Albin insisted he must be found by all means possible, suggesting this is no mere plague. Orlok on the other hand, recited an incantation meant to bring darkness upon the land. Thomas was sweating profusely while sleeping, and on spur of moment he lost his breath seeing visions of Orlok. Friedrich's children pleaded with Anna not to leave them by themselves, but she assured them everything would be fine. After she left their room she started having this feeling she was being stalked. Few minutes later she was immensely startled by Ellen. Ellen was acting all mysterious as she pleaded with Anna to spend the night with her. They eventually slept together, and Anna gave her a cross in conviction that God is with them. Going back to Albin's office he revealed they're encountering the undead plague carrier, the horrendous vampire, Nosferatu. Ellen woke up into a nightmare, and it was at this moment she met face to face with Nosferatu. He tried to convince her that she's not of humankind, after which he told her he has been laying silently in the darkest pit, claiming she was the one who woke him up. Orlok further tried to deceive her by unearthing Thomas signed their divorce papers for mere gold, thereby covenanting her to his bosom, but she was wise enough to know it was all lies. Orlok got immensely angry as she refused to fall for his tricks, so he gave her an ultimatum of 3 nights to submit herself, or else she's bound to lose virtually everyone she loves. According to him, if she refuses to bend to his will, he'll take away her beloved Thomas from her. Then almost immediately she woke up from the trance. Orlok had already started to manifest his power, as his plague-infested rats had already feasted on Anna. The entire city of Wisborg was about to be quarantined, due to the fact that the epidemic had spread like a wildfire. Anna was on the verge of losing control as she started experiencing adverse effects of the plague, while Friedrich stayed by her side all through to console her. Not long after he left the room, but he still found it had to believe this is the work of a demon, so he told Ellen to go back to her home with her husband, thinking they're the carriers of the infection. Ellen inquired why he hates her so much, but Friedrich took offense and refused to listen to all she was telling him. At Nock's office, Albin saw an ancient insignia on the wall that has long professed the coming of the Nosferatu. He further looked deeper, after which he found the devil's sign on his doormat. Ellen was on her way home with her sickened husband, and not long after they arrived home. Thomas tried to convince his wife to flee the city with him, but she told him it's no longer possible. It was then Ellen revealed to him she knows the devil. Instantaneously she told him how she summoned him when she was still young, and they've been lovers ever since then until Thomas married her. Ellen afterwards confronted Thomas about what the Count told her about him. The matter started going out of hand, after which she started shivering uncontrollably, and not long after, she was imminently possessed by the Nosferatu. Thomas noticed this, so to rebuke the demon out of her, he had a hardcore sex with her. After they made love, she regained consciousness immediately, and Thomas held her tightly in his arms. The following night, Orlok decided to show his power by first of all, devouring Friedrich's children, but he didn't just stop there. After Friedrich's children were buried, he finally came to peace with the fact that the Nosferatu exists. Von Franz proposes an expedition with Wilhelm and Thomas to decapitate Orlok's resting place at Skolsgrunward, but from his findings in his occult research, he unearthed the Nosferatu can only be truly destroyed through the willing sacrifice of a fair maiden, with only Ellen fit enough for the role. Friedrich was unable to contain the grief of losing both his wife and children, so he went to her coffin laid in the cemetery. Not long after he got there he committed necrophilia with his wife's corpse, and before von Franz and the rest of the crew could get there, he has already died from the plague, so in bid to sanctify the cemetery, they set their bodies ablaze. After this incident, they decided to carry on with their expedition immediately, while Ellen physically summons Orlok to her chambers. They eventually found the coffin they thought Orlok to be in. Thomas proceeded to open the coffin and stab the body immediately, but they unearthed Orlok wasn't there, rather it was Nock laying in his place. Due to the revelation Nock professed, Thomas figured the expedition was a diversion, so he scurried back to save his dear wife. Von Franz on the other hand said some prayers after which he burnt the crypt to the ground. Orlok imminently arrived to meet with his bride-to-be, and on getting inside she was right there waiting for him. She accepted all the marriage vows he recited and not long after, he made love to her. Ellen submitted herself to his will, by allowing him to feast on her, while also having a gruesome intercourse. The next morning Orlok started having a feeling of indifference within him, and with time to reverted to an inanimate corpse and died. Thomas eventually arrived and met his wife about to take her last breath, so he holds her hand tightly while she dies of exsanguination, having brought an end to the plague and the evil Nosferatu, and that was how the movie ended. Thanks for watching, please like, subscribe and comment. Thank you.